Hello, and welcome to another riveting episode of Lou in Progress. Dun dun dun! As I do my own sound effects. This episode is called Organized. Who's organized? It's definitely not me. I get this question a fair amount from other writers and even readers, and that's Lou. How the hell do you juggle so many characters and so many worlds all at once? And the answer is, I've had a lot of practice. Now, I probably never mentioned this before, but I got my first real writing experience on writing forums. And on these writing forums, what would happen is the admins, usually myself and some of my friends, would build an entire world and a basic plot, and then other people, as well as ourselves, would be able to play characters within that world and in that plot. This is actually how I met Chris's Christie and Elle Beaumont. Yay! But the practice comes in with the fact that Elle, Tiss, and I tend to be rather prolific and would sometimes juggle upwards of 20 characters at a time. So I have a lot of practice, at least as far as juggling characters goes. Now, on the other hand, juggling separate stories and separate worlds is kind of a completely different story. And that's one of those things that I've had to adjust to and figure out on my own. One of the things that keeps me organized to some degree is that all of my projects are in Flux. And when I mean they're in Flux, I mean that no two projects are usually at the same point in the writing process at the same time. Except for maybe if they're just ideas or they've been outlined, because I went through like a mass outlining a couple of months ago. So, for example, right now I have, 4 projects essentially going on. I have Villainous, which is off of my beta readers. I have Quest, which I just finished the second draft, which is waiting to go off to my beta readers. I have The Princess Starlight, which I got beta notes back from, and I'm slowly editing and getting uploaded to Wattpad. And then I have the Sea Witch, the second Sea Witch book, which has been outlined, which I will start drafting after I get notes back from Villainous and work on the third draft before sending it off to my editor. And by keeping everything at different stages, I'm able to work on multiple projects at one time. And that just keeps me from feeling really overwhelmed, and it also helps me from burning out. Now, when I am drafting more than one thing at the same time, I like to set up a schedule. And when I say schedule, this is very loosely speaking. By schedule, I mean that I like to do certain things at certain times of the day. It just helps my brain be like, oh, hey, now we're switching gears. So when I was working on the second draft of Villainous, but I was working on the second draft of Villainous at the same time I was working on The Princess Starlight. I worked on Villainous during the day, and I worked on The Princess Starlight in the evening. And it became my nighttime project, where I would do midnight words. And that just kept my brain from overlapping the two stories and the two voices and the two tones and the two worlds. Because after I finished Villainous, I would go and I would eat dinner, and then I'd come back and I'd do a little bit of reading, and then I'd be like, okay, and now we're gonna do some writing. And then I would get my 2,000 or whatever words done for The Princess Starlight, and just kept me from, like I said, overlapping the two. Another thing that's really helpful when I'm drafting more than one thing at a time, or even when I'm revising and drafting, is playlists. And I know a lot of writers use these, and I am guilty of it too. And sometimes I can't actually play the playlist while I'm writing because I find it very distracting sometimes. But playlists usually help me get into the mindset and the tone of the piece. So even if I'm just playing like the Villainous playlist, which I have one, which I can link you guys to if you'd want. So even if I'm just playing the Villainous playlist while I like get ready, while I get my shower and everything, while I get ready to write, and it usually gets me in the right mindset to write that thing. Now, when I say I'm working on more than one thing, I think it should be very clear. Usually I'm revising one thing and drafting another. But the thing is that when I'm revising one thing, I'm usually working on the second or third draft. And when I'm drafting, I'm usually just working on the first draft. And what I do when I'm revising is I'll have, on one side, I'll have my original manuscript with the beta notes on it. And then on the other side, I'll have a blank doc. And I'll type everything over into the blank doc. And usually I just copy large passages that haven't been dinged by the betas. And maybe sometimes I'll tweak some wording in there a little bit. But usually it just stays pretty much the same. So it's not, I guess I could go through and just hit the parts where I was dinged by the beta readers. But for me, that usually breaks up the flow. So this just keeps everything flowing nice and smoothly. Now, when I say drafting, I mean I'm working on the first draft. I'm doing the very first thing that I get on paper. So, when I was working on two things at once for December, I think it was December and January probably, I was working on the second draft of Villainous, or the third draft of Villainous, whatever. I was working on a new draft of Villainous, and I was working on the first draft of The Princess Starlight. And one of the things that really helps me when I'm doing this, and I have two projects that I have to think about, and they are so drastically different tonally, is the thing that I'm first drafting, I will reread the chapter that I worked on the previous night or the previous day, just to get back there in that headspace and that character and that world, and to get the tone correct. On top of this, I also keep a notebook, which I don't have sitting here, but I've shown you guys before. And the notebook has each of, like, I have several, you know what? I'm going to get the notebook. So on top of all of that, and my last ditch effort to be organized, is I have the handy dandy notebook with all the little tabs. And if you look closely, all the little tabs are different ideas. So I have a tab for heroics, I have a tab for the second Sea Witch book, I have a tab for Medusa, the Clockwork Library, Villainous, and a couple cursed book ideas here. So each of these tabs has a few pages on each story. So like this is the Curse of Ash and Blood story, which, as you can see, is a mess. It's a messy mess. But largely what's on here is just the basic idea of a mage and a dragon have an age-old feud. Gwyden loses their house over it. Gwyden's not happy. Gwyden punishes them both for it. And then it has like Fable and Blaze's names and their ages and what they like. Blaze is the dragon, Fable's the mage, and it just some like bits and bobs and pages upon pages of dialogue. And then I also have my outline in here. So this is as organized as I get. So what was my point again? All right. Organized. Who's organized? It's not Lou, because this is not organized, guys. This is a mess. My brain is constantly one tab shy of shorting out, and there's really nothing I can do about it, unfortunately. So most of these tips aren't really organizational in nature, and for that I apologize, because I'm not really an organized person. I'll be honest with you. And these are just ways that I've learned to cope with the fact that I can't turn off the flow of ideas, not even when I try. And sometimes things get a little crazy, and I'm working on way too many things at once. How do you guys stay organized? Let's hear what works and what doesn't work for you guys down in the comments below. Maybe you have a system that allows you to work on multiple projects at once. Maybe you only work on one project at a time. I don't know, but I'm curious. Maybe you have something that will help me or some of the others in our community. So whatever it is, drop it down below. And if you have any questions that you'd like me to discuss, you can drop those too. Or you can submit in the link via the description. Thanks for joining me. That's been another episode of Lou in Progress. Happy writing!